Olá a todos, bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, dependendo de onde vocês estejam. Good morning, good afternoon, buenos dias, buenas tardes, buenas noites não, né? Porque tá cedo ainda para o lado esquerdo. Então é bom dia e boa tarde ainda para o pessoal de cá. Good morning. Just a couple of seconds to make sure everyone is here. Whoa, look at this, Kong. Great, great man, great man. Celia Alves is in the chat. Celia for the English speakers and Celia for the Portuguese speakers. 1 p.m. So people with the calendar on Outlook, they are coming now. We started a little earlier this time to make sure that everyone can hear, everything is okay, and Celia is in the chat here. Okay, let's start with Celia Alves. Thanks for accepting the invitation. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Celia Alves.
Hello, thank you for joining me in this session of the Excel Weekend 7. Thank you, Cristiano Galvão and Ligia Galvão, for the invitation. And congratulations on the initiative and all the work done to make this awesome event happen. Okay, so let's go into our topic because the time is very limited. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Celia Alves. I am an Excel business solutions developer, and I build custom solutions for companies using Microsoft Excel, VBA, combining with Power Query, Power Pivot, and Solvent Excel Consulting is my company. A little bit of information about myself. My background, academic background, is in mathematics and education. I worked as a high school mathematics teacher for about 20 years back in Portugal. Then in 2013, I moved into Canada. And long story short, I became a Microsoft Excel consultant a few years after that. Recently, I went back to my teacher roots through my YouTube channel. Feel free to check that out. I also founded the MX Excel Toronto Meetup group here in Toronto in 2019. Feel free to check that as well. We have amazing guests every month presenting about all the different topics related to Excel, Power Query, and so on. In 2020, I received the MVP award by Microsoft. Okay, so what's the agenda for today? What is the M language and how to access that code? We will see what that is, how we can learn, and some examples. In Power Query, when we are using the user interface, we can build amazing solutions just by using what the user interface offers us. And when we do that, behind the scenes, the code is being generated for us, and that's what allows us to come back later and refresh a query and get our data updated. These are all the applications that use the M language. Today, we are going to use Excel. In here, I have several links to pages where you can get some information. For our topic today, this is the most important page to mention. Power Query M formula language. This is where you can learn what the M language is. And if you refer here to Power Query M functions, and then M functions overview, these are all the M function categories that we can use. For example, with date functions, we can see that we can get add dates to a date, add months to a certain date, and so forth. There's so many different functions. I encourage you to take a look at what we have here and just to have an idea of what is available. So being aware that this exists, then we can come back to here every time we need to solve a problem and we don't seem to find any specific button in our Power Query user interface that seems to be the one that allows us to solve the situation in our hands. To learn, one of the things I recommend is to have the formula bar activated. I will show you how to do that. And start paying attention to the code that is generated in that formula bar. And little by little, you will be able to identify the different components in each one of the M functions and be able to manipulate those components the way you need. Okay. Another way is to go to the View and Advanced Editor, and in there you will be able to see our code. We will go through that as well. So first example, how can we access the value of just one cell in the Power Query editor? You know that when we are working with Power Query, by default, we are working with full tables and we refer to full columns. But sometimes we need just one certain value in just one specific cell. Let's see how to do that. So in this specific situation, I have a file with a query that is connecting to this folder. This folder has reports from different stores. I was not successful at getting the store managers to send me the file all with a consistent name. And I cannot really rely on the file name to get the information about my store. And when we open one of the reports, all of them have the same structure. They just vary in the name, in the number of rows, and of course the specific values there. But we see that we have a store code here in column 3, row 1. So I really wanted to get this information in a new column here at the end, so that when I combine all the different stores data into just one table, I know which portion belongs to each store. Let's close this report. I already have a query here in this external file pointing to that folder that brings me the combination of the data from the different stores. But as you see, we don't have a column indicating the store code for each one of the records. Okay, so if you go to Data, Queries and Connections, we have the queries that I already mentioned and built before. This one is my main query, and these other ones are the helper queries that Power Query generates for us when we connect to a folder. Control-Shift+ to get this a little bit bigger. So here is the result of combining the information from different stores. We don't have the store ID or store code. If you go here to the transform sample file query, this is the query where we explain Power Query what it needs to do with which one of the files. In this case, we are going to the source. By default, it's the first file in the folder. And then we can see that we have these extra rows here at the top that we can remove to get to the table with the data we need. Then we promoted the first row as headers, and then we split it. We have an extra step here that consists in splitting the information in this column. Okay, now I want to refer to what I had in the source step and then extract the value in that cell. So to do that, I can come here to my last step, come to my formula bar. If you don't have it there, you can come to View and put a check mark there. Okay, and click here to generate a new step. The name of the step is automatically created by Power Query, but you can change that name. Let's right-click and rename this as store code. I want this step to give me the store code in this file. And remember, this is the transform sample file, so we are looking at the data for one store only. Okay. And what is that I want this step to do? By default, when we create a step in Power Query, it refers to the previous step. The previous step was named split column by delimiter, and because the step name has space characters, we need to put the step name in between double quotes and have a hash sign before that. Since I want to go back to the source step, and that's just one word, I don't need any of that, so no double quotes or hash sign. I just need to type source. This brings me back the exact same thing I had there. So now to extract that value, I can say, okay, so first give me the column 3, and I refer to the column header, exactly spelled the same way I have here, column 3, enter. This gives me a list where each element of the list is one value in that column. Now, from this column, I want the first element in the list. We need to remember that Power Query is zero-based, meaning that row 1 will be index 0. So here, if I put a 0, press enter, I get the value of the first element in that list that I brought from table source, column 3. If I had done the other way around, first indicating the row, I get the record, so the information about all the fields in that row. So these are the field names, which correspond to the column headers, and then the values in each one of those fields. And then I can say from this record, record 0, I want the value in column 3. So I can put the column name at the end. We will get to the same result. So both work. So now I have store code step generating exactly what I need to put in a column that gives me the store ID. So now I want to go back to this step. Because this step has this very long name, I can rename this and maybe call it base, just a short name to be easy to use. Let's go to the last step here. Create a new step, clicking here. By default, Power Query refers to the previous step, which was store code, but we can say, no, I don't want you to go there. I want you to go to the base step, enter. Okay, so I'm seeing the same that I had in there. And now in this table here, I want to add a custom column. So I can go to add columns, custom column, and in the custom column, I can say I want to create a column that will be named store ID. And in that column, I want you to type the store code, which is the step that we just created. Say OK. And there we go. Store ID column, new column with the store code populated throughout the column. We don't really need this step here. Here we have everything we need. So we can come here and remove this step. Something will happen, an error, but we will take care of that. So now Power Queries always thinks I want to refer to the previous step. So it's putting this step here, referring to step store code, and trying to add a column to that step. But that step store code is not a table, so it cannot add a column to it. So I'm going to replace here store code with base. Enter. Okay, so there we go. Now we have the table we had before with this extra column we needed. If now we go back to the store reports main query, we see that at the end we have the new column store ID indicating the store code for all the stores. Okay, so to load the data, I should before that come to indicate the data type. So Control A to select all the columns, and then here detect that data type, and then make sure to go through all the guesses that Power Query made for you and see if everything is okay. In this case, it's good enough. So I'm just going to do home, close and load, and I should see my new column showing in here. There we go. I can see I have 3 columns there, 3 store codes there. This was my first tip. I hope it was useful. Let's see the next one. In this second example, we will look at the specific request that consists in extracting all the data from one certain data set where we are interested in getting the records belonging to dates starting in the current month's first day and all the dates after that. So current month and all the any future dates that may exist in our data set. So this is our data, and we can see it starts in January 1st and goes down to July 9th. So data from table range, my table has headers. We have only 2 columns because it's just for the purpose of this demo. It's enough. Control Shift Plus to zoom in. We see that we already have change type applied here, but it didn't guess it right. Here we need this to be date. So replace current step, yes. So we have a date column and an amount column as a whole number. So since we have dates here, if we come to the filter button here at the top, we have this option date filters, and the array of possibilities we have here is amazing. We are interested in getting data after a certain date, but we want that date to be dynamic and refer to the current month date. If we go to the month options, we see that we have several options here too. Is in the next month, is this month, is in the last month. So we could try this month, but this won't work because this will give us dates starting in June 1st, which is correct, but then it will end in June 30th. And the function, M function we get here is a specific function for this particular request of getting the dates from the current month is in current month. So this won't work for what we need. So let's delete that. And let's see how we can do this. There's probably different ways of going about it. My strategy many times is to first make this work for a specific value, and then let's see how we can make that value dynamic to answer correctly to our request. So if we go to date filters, we can go and use after. In the after, is after or equal to, and in this specific case, I want is after or equal to June 1st, which is the month I am recording this video. So, okay, so I'm recording the video in June the 5th. And in this case, my function here is say, give me all the dates that are greater than or equal to the specific date. This is also an M function that has 3 components: the year, the month, and the day. The day is always 1 for what we need. We want to start in day 1 of the current month. But then the month and the year need to be dynamic to be the month and the year of the time we update our query. So what we can do is start by referring to the current time. For that, we have the function datetime.local now. This function does not have any parameters. Okay? If I press enter, of course, I'll get an error here. And this is because my function is expecting a month value here, and this is a date time value. From this current date and time, in fact, I just need the date portion, not the time. So date time dot, and then we have date here, dot date. So date time dot date, open parentheses, and then we put the date time local now function in it. It's the same thing as nesting. If you look up with an if function in Excel, a match inside an index, same thing. So here, if we do enter, it still won't work because this value is a date, and in between these 2 commas, the date dash hashtag date function is expecting a month value. So now this is returning me a date, and I can say, okay, from this date, give me the month. Okay, there we go. So nesting these different functions allowed us to extract the month value for the current moment we are in. Then we can come here and replace the year 2021 with the exact same thing, except that here instead of date.month, we will get date.year. Enter. And this will work. It's working, but it's dynamic. I won't be able to demonstrate that it's working because for that I would have to come back another month and run the query and see that this is dynamic. Okay, here now we just need to do close and load, and we will get our dates always starting from the first of the current month onwards until the end of the data we have available. In this case, it is July the 9th. The important lesson here is be aware that we have many M functions available to us. Some of them are not available directly through the buttons and the options we have in the Power Query ribbon, but you can include them in your code. Now let's see the last example, dynamic column list. In this example, I have a table with information about several events. Every time a new event happens, we get a new column name here, and this column can be named anything. And we always want to get the first column, which is always named location, and the last column in our table. How can we do that? One way of doing this could be the following. So let's work in the very same file, selecting the data, and go to data from table/range. And in Power Query, let's use kind of the same approach as before. Let's work first, make this work first for one specific value, and then find a way of turning that value into something that is dynamic to give us always what we need. So in this specific situation, where my last event was the handwriting day, I want to extract from this column the first column, go to the end, and select the last column, right-click, and remove other columns. I forgot to say that Power Query added the change type step in here. Let's remove it for now, and then we add it after we have only the columns we need. So I get this function table.select columns, and then in here I have the column names hard-coded in my function. This means that the next time I run the code, the Power Query will be looking for a column handwriting day, but that's not the column I want to select the next time. I want to select whatever the last column will be in my data that time. So let's keep that in mind. The last step I would do to complete this query would be to come and change the data type. So here I want this to be text, and the last one, let's say whole number. And then I would go close and load to, and let's see, let's put it here in the existing worksheet just below this table, just for the purpose of this demonstration. Okay, so we get location and writing day, which are the two columns I am interested in. Let's go back to editing our query to make this dynamic. How do we teach Power Query that I'm not interested in the handwriting day specific column? I am interested in whatever is our last column. So before these two last steps, I want to find a way of making Power Query find the name of the last column that is hard-coded here. So what I really need is to find a way of replacing handwriting day by something that returns me the name of the last column dynamically, regardless of what that column name is. Okay, so before these two steps, I need to find a way to do that. So let's go to source and create a new step here, insert. And I want to use the following function, table.column names. I have it here, double click there, and then open parentheses and refer to the source table in there. So this gives me the name of all the columns in my source table. Okay. From this list, I want to keep only the last one. For that, we can use this button here, keep bottom items, insert a step, and in here, I want to say 1. And it gives me a list with just one element. And now I want to extract that value. So I want to say index 0 to indicate the first item of the list, which is in fact only 1. We could refer to the function that gives us the count of columns, but this is just easier. Okay, so we can in fact make these steps, 2 steps, just one. So this one is referring to the custom step, and the custom step is referring to the table source. So we can copy this and come here and replace this in there. Again, we are nesting functions, one inside the other. So now we don't need that step anymore. Okay, so now we have the source. This step automatically was named navigation, and it does not give us the option to rename it. So because it's a special step after the source, so let's leave it like that. But now we need to do something here. Here, the removed other columns step is referring to the last step we had here in the navigation, which was to keep the last items. Let's delete that and say I want to refer to the source step. Okay. Enter. Okay. So we have our source table. We have a navigation step that is giving us the name of the last column. And we have the other 2 steps we had before. Here we have the handwriting day, but the value we have here, we want it to be dynamic, and it's being generated by the step navigation. So we can try to type navigation here. It doesn't work because, again, the navigation step is a special step that, in fact, if we go to our code, if we go to View Advanced Editor, we see that we don't have a navigation step here, that the step is called kept last items. Okay, we can try rename this here as last column name, and then we can use last column name here, and in here the same, last column name. Okay, so let's see if that works. So this worked. It keeps calling navigation to this second step, but in our code we gave it a different name, and we are using it in our function. There are other ways of working with this. We could just eliminate this step. For example, we could just eliminate this step from here, copy this code, and put it here twice. Same thing twice. And then we don't need this there. And in here, we are referring to the previous step source, so everything is okay. So that also works. Now we don't need the navigation. We don't have a navigation. So everything is good. Let's see if this works. Let's bring a new column to our data. This would be the science fiction day. Refresh. And there we have our data 231, 261. These are the values here in our column. So it's working. So the tip here was, remember you have many functions available. Remember that you can nest M functions ones inside of others. And remember that you can manipulate the code both in your formula bar and in your advanced editor. Okay. That's it. That's what I wanted to show you. Just reminding you that I have a lot of tips like these ones, either in Power Query, in Excel, VBA. Feel free to check that playlist, the Excel Report Automation Live classes. And this is the list of places where you can connect with me. In Telegram, I have a channel that you can join for free to get the files for any of my live classes. I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you, Cristiano and Ligia, and all of you enjoy Excel Weekend 7.